The waterfall wall was Julian Vance's favorite mistake. 3 stories of recirculating water, infused with lavender and eucalyptus, cascading over polished obsidian in the heart of Vitality Vault's atrium, cost $400,000. It broke the building's plumbing twice. It also made every visitor gasp when they walked in, which was the entire point. Julian stood on the stage beneath it, the mist kissing the back of his neck, and smiled into the cameras. "Excellence," he said, spreading his hands like a televangelist, "is not a destination, it is a practice. And here at Vitality Vault, we practice every single day. We practice discipline. We practice clarity. We practice." He paused, winked at the blonde intern in the front row. She was 22, fresh out of Princeton, and her name was something he'd forgotten the moment HR introduced them. But she had excellent cheekbones, and she was staring at him like he was a god. And that was really all that mattered. "We practice accountability," he finished, because it tested well with focus groups. The teleprompter scrolled. He glanced at it, then back at the crowd. His people, his temple, his money. Then the screen behind him flickered. Julian frowned. The AV team knew better than to interrupt his rhythm. He opened his mouth to ad-lib, to smooth over whatever technical glitch was about to embarrass him. And his own voice filled the atrium. "Sweetheart, the glass ceiling is a mindset. Just meditate it away." The crowd went silent. Julian turned. The massive screen, 20 feet of hyper-bright OLED, was showing a compilation. Him in various meetings, interrupting, dismissing, patronizing. There he was, telling his VP of product, a woman with 2 MBAs and 20 years in the industry, to calm down, honey, it's just a quarterly projection. There he was, taking credit for an idea that his head of R&D had presented 5 minutes earlier. There he was, in a leaked audio clip, laughing with his COO about female logic and emotional hiring quotas. The final clip was the worst. A town hall from 6 months ago. A junior designer, a quiet, brilliant woman named Priya, had asked a question about pay equity. Julian had leaned into the microphone and said, "If you want equal pay, maybe you should work equal hours. Some of us are here until midnight. Some of us don't have." He'd paused, smirked. "Distractions." The screen went black. The atrium was so quiet Julian could hear the waterfall. He could hear his own heartbeat. He could hear the click of someone's phone camera, and then another, and then 100 more as his employees, his loyal, well-paid, totally under-control employees, began recording his face. His COO, Mark, appeared at his elbow, sweating through his linen blazer. "Julian, we need to go. Now." "I don't." Julian's voice cracked. He cleared his throat. "I don't understand." "Who?" "Board is in emergency session. They're invoking the restorative justice rider. You have 48 hours to hire an independent accountability partner, or they're calling a vote of no confidence." Julian laughed. Came out hollow. "An accountability partner? What the hell is that? A babysitter?" Mark grabbed his arm. "A babysitter with veto power over every single decision you make. Now move." They walked. Julian would not call it fleeing. Through the back corridors, past the juice bar, past the meditation pods, past the rows of employees who parted like the Red Sea. He caught snippets of their whispers. "Did you see his face? Finally, that intern is shaking." He didn't look back, but he felt it. The fall, the crumbling, the first brick of his empire tumbling down. 47 hours later, Julian sat in his corner office and practiced his humbled face. It was harder than he'd expected. He'd spent 2 decades perfecting the smirk, the wink, the casual dismissal that made him feel powerful. The humbled face required softening his jaw, lowering his eyes, and, this was the worst part, not speaking first. He practiced in the reflection of his floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sprawled beneath him, Manhattan's glittering spine, all those millions of people who would never know what it felt like to stand on top of the world. He'd been on top. Now he was here, waiting for a consultant, a babysitter, to decide his fate. The door opened. Julian stood. He'd prepared a speech. Humble, self-aware, a little bit wounded. The kind of speech that made people forgive you so they could feel generous about themselves. The woman who walked in was not the target audience for that speech. She was tall, impossibly straight-backed. Her black pantsuit was severe. No lapel pin, no jewelry except a single silver watch. Her hair was cut in a razor-sharp bob that looked like it could slice through his pride. And her glasses, round, wire-rimmed, perched on a face that gave absolutely nothing away, caught the light and reflected it back at him like a warning. She carried a leather binder the size of a tombstone and a steel water bottle that looked industrial military. She did not smile. "Julian Vance," she said. Her voice was low, calibrated, the kind of voice that had never needed to be raised. 14 minutes late. That's strike one. He laughed. He couldn't help it. It was reflex, the way a dog salivated at a bell. Strike one? Sweetheart, I own the building. You're a consultant. You consult. I decide. She sat down without being invited, placed the binder on his desk, opened it to a page marked with a red tab. "Actually," she said, "the board gave me binding authority. Read the addendum, page 47, subsection C. I can freeze your expense accounts, override your hires, and publicly certify your compliance. Or non-compliance." She slid a document across the desk. 200 pages. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind of paper that lawyers used when they wanted you to know they'd already won. Julian picked it up, flipped to page 47. His stomach dropped. "You're Sloan Parrish," he said slowly. "The consultant. The one who wrote the corporate accountability framework for the Department of Justice?" "Yes." "Also the one who facilitated the restructuring of 3 Fortune 500 companies after harassment settlements. I'm very good at my job. You're a wrecking ball. I'm a scalpel." She tapped the binder. "But I'm also the one holding the contract. And this contract is very specific." She pulled out another document. This one was shorter, single-spaced. A cover page that read, in bold, "The accountability contract. Every microaggression," Sloan said, her voice flat. "Unsolicited pet names, interruptions, credit theft, dismissive language. You donate $10,000 to the Women's Futures Fund. I control the disbursement. Every public slight, say a patronizing speech, a demeaning comment, a failure to amplify female voices in a meeting, you perform a humiliating task. Wearing a sandwich board that says, 'I need to listen,' cleaning the women's locker room, in your suit, in front of the press, whatever I deem appropriate." Julian stared at her. "You're insane." Page 12. Definitions. Microaggression is defined as, "I know what a microaggression is." He slammed his palm on the desk. "I'm not an idiot. Could have fooled me." The words hung in the air. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't even blinked. She'd simply dismantled him in 3 words with the clinical precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. Julian leaned forward. His blood was hot. His temples were pounding. But beneath the rage, something else stirred. Something he hadn't felt in years. Respect. "And if I refuse?" he asked, his voice low. She leaned forward too. Now they were inches apart. He could smell her perfume. Something sharp, something like cedar and citrus. No flowers. No sweetness. She smelled like a forest after rain. Like a warning. "Then I walk," she said. "The board sells the company to your biggest rival for pennies on the dollar. You get a golden parachute and a permanent reputation as the man who couldn't handle one woman with a binder. One woman with a binder." She said it like it was nothing, like she was nothing. But Julian had been in business for 20 years, and he knew when he was looking at a predator. This woman was not a consultant. She was a shark wearing human skin. He picked up the pen. "I'm going to make you quit," he said. She smiled. It was the first expression she'd shown, and it was terrifying. Not because it was cruel, because it was amused. Because she was looking at him like he was a child who'd just threatened to beat her at chess. "I don't quit," Sloane Parrish said. I collect. He signed. She signed. The ink gleamed on the page like blood. The first week was a bloodbath. Julian learned very quickly that Sloane Parrish had no mercy. She had no off switch. She had no sense of humor that didn't involve watching him squirm. Monday, a product meeting. Julian was presenting the new Vitality Vault app, a guided meditation platform with AI-driven personalization. He was in his element. The slides were beautiful. The data was impeccable. His voice was resonant, confident. The voice of a man who had never doubted himself for a single second. Ladies, he said, turning to the design team, let me explain the user flow. Sloane held up a red card, like a referee, like a god. Donation, she said. $10,000. Ladies is a patronizing collective noun in a professional setting. You know their names. Use them. The design team, 5 women, all of whom had been avoiding eye contact with him for months, slowly looked up. Their faces were a mixture of shock and barely suppressed glee. Julian's jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone. Venmo'd Sloane $10,000. Thank you, she said. Continue, but correctly. He continued. He said their names. He hated every second. Tuesday, an all-hands town hall. Julian was supposed to deliver a mea culpa, a grand gesture of humility. He'd prepared remarks. He'd practiced the humbled face. He was ready. Sloane stood in the back of the room. She didn't take notes. She didn't look impressed. She just watched. Julian took the stage. The waterfall was off. The mist was gone. The room felt cold. I want to address the video, he began. I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. But I'm committed to growth. And I'm committed to this company. And I'm committed to... Sloane moved. She walked up the side aisle, her heels clicking like a metronome. She handed him a pink slip. Not a termination, but a task assignment. You forgot to mention your female co-founder, she whispered, too low for anyone else to hear. Again, that's a public slight. Put this on. The pink slip had a foam finger attached to it. A giant hand the size of his head with the words, I'm listening, printed in neon green. Julian looked at her. She looked at him. If you don't, she said, smiling her terrifying smile, the donation is 100,000, and I'll tell the press that you refused to acknowledge the woman who built this company with you. His co-founder, Amelia, the one he'd pushed out 6 years ago, after she'd had a baby, after he'd told her that the company needs someone who can commit full-time. She'd walked away with a settlement. He'd walked away with her patents. He put on the foam finger. Wednesday, a podcast interview. The host was a woman named Nina, sharp and skeptical, and she'd been asking Julian about his journey to accountability for 15 excruciating minutes. Do you think, Nina said, that you would have ever reached this point without external pressure? Julian preened. I've always believed in self-reflection. The journey of a leader is... He caught Sloane's eye. She was off camera, standing behind the producer's desk. She held up a sign, mention Amelia. He ignored her. She held up another sign, you have 3 seconds. He ignored her. She held up a third sign, locker room. Mop, suit, 2 hours. Julian cleared his throat. I've also been reflecting on my co-founder, he said, the words tasting like ash. Amelia Chen. She was the architect of our early success, and I failed to give her proper credit. I apologize for that. Publicly. Sincerely. Nina blinked. She'd clearly not expected that. Julian looked at Sloane. She nodded once, a tiny dip of her chin, and then she turned away. He couldn't stop staring at the back of her head, at the way her hair curved against her neck, the way her shoulders, impossibly straight, seemed to hold the entire weight of the room without flinching. He hated her. He hated her so much that he couldn't look away. Thursday, he cleaned the women's locker room. In his Armani suit, with a mop and a bucket. The janitorial staff watched. The marketing team watched. Someone filmed it and it went viral, and his mother called him crying. Julian, what have you become? He didn't have an answer. But when he looked up from the mop bucket, Sloane was standing in the doorway, watching him, and her eyes, cold, clinical, impossible to read, flickered for just a moment. Something like satisfaction, something like pride. By the end of week 3, Julian had donated $340,000 to the Women's Futures Fund. He'd worn the foam finger 7 times. He'd cleaned the locker room twice. He'd publicly apologized to every woman whose name he'd ever forgotten, including the intern from the front row, whose name was Chloe, and who was now terrified to be in the same room as him. The company was in chaos. The stock was down 18%. The board was mutinying. And Julian was obsessed. It wasn't the humiliation. He'd been humiliated before, during the recession, when his father had called him a failure. During his first divorce, when his ex-wife had taken half his net worth and all his dignity. It wasn't even the money, though he'd started to keep a running tally in his head, a morbid game of, how much will this one cost me? It was her. Sloane Parrish was everywhere. In meetings, watching him with those unblinking eyes. In the hallway, her heels clicking a rhythm that made his pulse speed up. In his dreams, which he would never, ever admit to, where her hands were not holding a binder but gripping his hair, and her voice was not clinical but breathless. And he was losing his mind. "You're losing your mind," Mark said, 2 days before the gala. "You're staring at her like a lost puppy. It's embarrassing." "I'm not staring at her," Julian snapped. "I'm strategizing. She's a variable. Problem. I'm solving the problem. The problem is that you're obsessed with the woman who's destroying your company. I'm not obsessed. I'm watching her. I'm tracking her breathing. I'm noticing the way she crosses her legs, the way she bites her lip when she's reading a particularly damning report, the way her pulse Julian froze. He'd been watching her pulse. At the last meeting, he'd noticed the flutter in her throat when he'd stepped too close. He'd seen her pupils dilate when he'd leaned over her shoulder. He'd felt her breath catch when he'd accidentally, or not accidentally, brushed her hand. She was not immune. The realization hit him like a freight train. She hated him, but she also felt something that made her pulse jump, something that made her lean in when he spoke, something that made her eyes darken when he got too close. He had leverage, or he had a death wish. He couldn't decide which. The gala was at the Pierre Hotel. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, a live jazz band that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Every influencer, every journalist, every venture capitalist with a pulse was there, and they were all watching Julian Vance to see if he'd humiliate himself again. He did not humiliate himself. He charmed. He schmoozed. He shook hands and kissed cheeks and talked about growth and learning and the importance of listening. He was a reformed man, a redeemed man, a man who had seen the error of his ways. And then he saw Sloane. She was standing by the railing of the rooftop terrace, alone, her silhouette sharp against the glittering Manhattan skyline. She'd worn a dress, a deep burgundy sheath that clung to her body like a second skin. No binder, no glasses, just her and the city and a glass of champagne she was holding like a weapon. Julian walked toward her. He couldn't help it. His feet moved on their own. His body was a traitor. "Enjoying yourself?" he asked, leaning against the railing beside her. Sloane didn't turn. "I'm enjoying the $340,000 we've raised. And the fact that you haven't called me sweetheart in 11 days. 11 days. He smiled. "You're counting. I'm documenting. It's my job. It's not your job to know the exact number of days since I last patronized you. That's personal." Now she turned. Her eyes met his, and there it was, that flicker, that tiny crack in her armor. "What if I told you," Julian said, stepping closer, "that I'm starting to admire your methods? I'd say you're trying to disarm me. It won't work. No, I'm trying to understand you." He stepped closer. She didn't move. "You hate me, but you also watch me. You track my breathing in meetings. You lean in when I speak." She froze. He could feel it, the tension in her spine, the sudden stillness of her body. "I'm tracking your compliance," she said, her voice too quiet, too controlled. "That's my job." "Then why?" he murmured, reaching for her wrist. "Does your pulse jump every time I get close?" He touched her, just his fingers, just the inside of her wrist, where the skin was thin and the blood was racing. She didn't pull away. For one endless second, they stood there, his hand on her wrist, her eyes locked on his. The city hummed below. The jazz band played on. The camera of a Gotham Gazette photographer clicked, capturing the image that would ruin them both. Sloane wrenched her hand away. "You're a liability," she hissed. Julian grinned. It was the first time he'd genuinely smiled in 3 weeks. "So are you," he said. "That's the fun part." Sloane slammed the door of her hotel suite and leaned against it, her heart pounding. She'd been so careful, so precise. She'd built this plan over 6 months, the shell companies, the burner phones, the meticulous documentation of every microaggression so that when the leak happened, it would be undeniable. She'd chosen Julian Vance because he was the perfect target. Arrogant, blind, so certain of his own superiority that he'd never see the knife coming. But she hadn't counted on him seeing her. She hadn't counted on the way his hand felt on her wrist, the way his voice dropped when he said her name, the way he looked at her like she was the most dangerous woman he'd ever met, and he loved it. Her phone buzzed. "Maya." Sloane answered. "Did you get it?" Maya asked, her voice crackling over the burner line. "I got it. He's a pressure cooker. Tomorrow, I'll push him over the edge. And the video? Propped on the desk. It'll catch everything." "Good. The stock is down 18%. The board is panicking. One more scandal and they'll sell. Our shell companies are ready." Sloane stared at her reflection in the mirror. She looked calm. She looked like herself. But her hands were shaking. "Maya," she said slowly. What if he what? She couldn't finish the sentence. What if he found out? What if he didn't care? What if he admired her for it? What if she didn't want to destroy him anymore? "Nothing," she said. "The video will leak at 10 a.m. Be ready." She hung up, and for the first time in her carefully calculated life, Sloane Parrish didn't know what she was going to do. The next morning, Julian was in a mood. He'd barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sloane's face. The way her breath had caught when he'd touched her. The way her pulse had raced under his fingers. She was playing him. He knew that. She was a mercenary, a hired gun, and her only loyalty was to her contract. But there had been something else in her eyes. Something that wasn't scripted. He walked into his office and found her waiting for him. Binder open, glasses glinting. 47 microaggressions in 1 week, she announced. "You called your CFO buddy 5 times. You talked over 3 female directors. You took credit for a presentation that was entirely designed by your junior." "I know what I did." Julian slammed his palm on the desk. "You don't have to read it back to me like I'm a child. Then stop acting like one." She stood up. She was wearing her severe black pantsuit again, the one that made her look like she was attending a funeral, his funeral. "You've turned my own employees against me," Julian spat. "They're scared to speak to me. They flinch when I walk into a room. Is that your idea of accountability? Terror. Terror." Sloane stepped closer. "They were scared of you before I got here. I just gave them a voice. A voice, right? You gave them permission to hate me." "No, Julian. You did that all on your own." He was on his feet now, advancing. She didn't back down. She never backed down. "I built this company," he said, his voice low and shaking. "I sweated for this. I bled for this. And you walk in with your little rules and your cold eyes and you act like you're some moral authority. But you're just a bully with a PhD. A bully." She laughed. A short, sharp sound that was half fury, half disbelief. "I'm the one who made you clean toilets. I'm the one who made you feel small. How does it feel, Julian? To be dismissed? To be talked over? To have your worth reduced to a line item? It feels..." He stopped. His voice cracked. "It feels infuriating. feels unfair. Good. She was inches from him now. Now you know. They were chest to chest. He could feel her heat, the barely suppressed fury radiating off her skin. Her eyes were burning, and his were burning back, and the hatred between them was so thick it was almost solid. And then, without thinking, Julian grabbed her wrist. She grabbed his tie. They lunged. The kiss was not tender. It was not romantic. It was violence, a war fought with mouths and teeth and hands that gripped too hard. He pushed her against the bookshelf, and the books tumbled down around them, and she pulled his hair, and he bit her lip and she bit him back. It was hate. It was hunger. It was the collapse of every wall they'd built. And on the desk, her phone recorded every second. The video leaked within hours. Julian saw it first on his phone, in the back of a town car, on his way to the emergency board meeting. His face was flushed, his lips were swollen, and Sloane was in the seat beside him, silent and still as a statue. Vitality CEO and accountability partner caught in screaming kiss. Is this the most toxic romance in corporate history? Julian Vance. From mansplainer to passion project? The comments were brutal. The memes were worse. But the stock was the strangest part. Plummeted. Then it stabilized. Then it started to tick upward as the public, hungry for drama, decided that this was the greatest story of the year. People love a redemption arc, Julian said, his voice hollow. They love a man brought to his knees by a woman who matches his fire. Sloane didn't respond. She was looking at her phone. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking. Are you okay? Julian asked. It was the first time he'd ever asked her that. She looked at him, and for a moment, just a moment, her armor slipped. I'm fine, she said. I'm always fine. But he didn't believe her. The board meeting was chaos. Julian sat at the head of the table, his tie loose, his eyes red. The board members were shouting over each other, demanding his resignation, demanding a sale, demanding anything that would stop the bleeding. We're selling, the chairman announced. The vultures are circling. A consortium of private equity firms just made a hostile bid. Who? Julian asked. The doors opened. A woman walked in, sharp, professional, carrying a leather briefcase. Julian had never seen her before. But Sloane had. Sloane's face went white. Not private equity, the woman said. Us. She placed a stack of documents on the table. Julian grabbed them, flipping through, his eyes widening with every page. You, he whispered, turning to Sloane. You orchestrated the leak. You tanked the stock. You bought out the board with shell companies. Sloane stood. Her chin was high. Her eyes were unblinking. I'm the new majority stakeholder, she said. As of 9 a.m., the board erupted. Security was called. Lawyers were summoned. But Julian didn't move. He just stared at Sloane, his face cycling through shock, betrayal, disbelief. And then, impossibly, a smile. He started to laugh. Brilliant, he said, clapping his hands together. Absolutely brilliant. Sloane blinked. What? You played me. You played the board. You played the public. You turned a scandal into a hostile takeover. And you did it while making me donate to women's causes and scrub toilets. He shook his head, laughing. That's not revenge. That's art. He walked to her. The board was frozen. The guards were waiting. But Julian Vance had never cared about decorum. I spent my whole life looking for a worthy opponent, he said, quiet enough for only her to hear. I thought it was other CEOs. It was you. It was always you. Sloane's voice cracked. I just destroyed your company. No, you saved it. He extended his hand. Because I'm staying. As your CEO. You need my face for the brand, the redeemed sinner. And I need your brain to actually run it right. Partners. She searched his eyes. For a trick. For a trap. She found neither. He was serious. He was offering her his empire, his reputation, his everything. And he was smiling like she'd given him the greatest gift of his life. She shook his hand. The board erupted again. The press conference was a circus. Julian and Sloane stood at the podium, cameras flashing, microphones reaching toward them like hungry mouths. "I am stepping down as CEO," Julian announced. "Dr. Sloane Parrish will be taking over. I will serve as her accountability partner." He smiled. "The contract remains. In fact, I'm doubling the donation amounts." Laughter. Applause. Sloane turned to him, her voice a whisper. "You're not angry?" Julian leaned close, his lips brushing her ear. "I'm turned on. Is that weird?" She fought a smile and lost. "We are rebranding Vitality Vault," she said to the press, "as a company that holds everyone accountable, starting with its leadership. This is not a romance. It's a reckoning." A reporter yelled, "But the kiss!" Julian grabbed the mic. "That," he said, grinning, "that was just closing arguments." He looked at Sloane. She looked at him, and for the first time she let him see the truth. The awe, the respect, the terrifying, impossible affection. She was going to win, and she was going to keep him. That night, Sloane sat behind Julian's, now her, desk. He brought her a glass of whiskey. 2 glasses. His was already half empty. "You know," he said, settling into the chair across from her, "most people would fire me. Most people don't own the company." She sipped the whiskey. It burned, but she liked it. "Also, you're useful. You have the charm. I have the brain. Together, we're unstoppable." "And the contract? Still binding." She reached into her binder, her old binder, the one with the red tabs, and pulled out a single page. "Always," she said. "In fact, I'm adding a new clause." She slid it across the desk. Julian read it. His eyebrows rose. "For every act of genuine vulnerability, Julian Vance must take Sloane Parrish on a date. No mansplaining allowed." He looked up. She was smirking. "This is blackmail. This is leverage. You in?" He took her hand, kissed it not mockingly but reverently. "I'm in. But I'm warning you. I'm a terrible date." Sloane leaned over the desk. Her lips were inches from his. "Good," she said. "I love a fixer-upper." They kissed. Slower this time. No cameras. No leaks. Just 2 sharks who'd realized they swam better together. In the morning, the headlines would change again. The power couple of the year. Vance and Parrish. A love story for the #MeToo era. They'd sell books. They'd sell merchandise. They'd sell the whole damn empire again, and they'd do it with a smile. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, Sloane Parrish was the new CEO of Vitality Vault. Julian Vance was her accountability partner. And somewhere in the middle of the chaos, the hate, the obsession, and the coup, they'd found something neither of them had been looking for. Each other. Thanks for sticking around until the end. If you found this story interesting, please consider giving this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. And if you want to hear plenty more stories just like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. There's a lot more to unpack in future videos. See you soon.